it's a plot to drop the IQ. Fighting amongst each other over rumors that don't like you. Prefer us trapped in melancholy with the wood wands of holly. Suggestions that obliterate to camouflage the folly. Attempted mental robbery, executed sloppily. The hypocrisy, this mockery, and walk the talk with me. Put the hands up to touch the akasha, cause you know deep down there's something bigger than your wallet.
Oh, sweet eternal balance of all that is good, true, and beautiful. Friends, it has been a long time, maybe 9 months, we think, since we have last seen our good friend Michael Wann here. Never on Middle Path, actually, only on Rogue Ways. So first time on Middle Path for you, Michael. And Michael, of course, is the Synchro mystic piercer of the veil, who weaves stories that remind us who we truly are and calls to understand the Matrix, the most fundamental of levels. The master of the Susquehanna mystery, the astrological sage, the pattern master, and the folk shamanic artist himself, Michael Wann. Michael, it is so good to have you back. How are you doing tonight?
I am doing very well, Lindsay. Thank you for having me. That's quite an introduction, so I feel a little bit embarrassed and humble. But it was sweet. Thank you.
You deserve better than that. I feel like I mangled it a bit, but it's always good to have you here and be amongst friends and get to have an always pleasant conversation. But it's even more exciting this time, not just because it's your first time on Middle Path, but because this coming Sunday, you and I are doing the One Day of Brightness, and this is your first time doing the One Day of Brightness event, which is super exciting for everybody involved. And for anybody who doesn't know, there is only 2 tickets left. If for some reason somebody desperately wanted to come and there were no tickets left, just email me or contact me through the site and we'll see if we can work something out. But pretty exciting to have this many people this excited to come. It is all day. It is virtual. It is recorded in case you have to step out for a moment, although being there live is always best because not only do you get Michael Wann and his presentation, you get Chance Garden and his healing and what he's doing, Catherine O'Shea, who's always channeling just the most beautiful energy and messages through to us, and myself leading a couple of the sections as well. You get giveaways. There are people who are giving away. Catherine, I know, is giving away 3 different sessions with her. I'm giving away some orgone and a tarot reading. I don't know if Michael plans on giving any offerings like that, and maybe Chance does too. It's still as yet to be decided. But there's all kinds of good stuff if you're there with us live, so it is better to be there live. But I'm going to try to do the giveaways at multiple times throughout the day, so don't worry if you're going to miss part of it. And if you don't have your ticket yet, like I said, go grab it. It's this Sunday. We're going to be celebrating the autumnal equinox and the balance that is achieved at this place and more. And Michael, are you excited about it?
I'm very excited. I've got a lot of questions. I just heard that description. So a lot of that was new to me as well. So how do the giveaways work?
Generally what I do is I say, all right, everybody out there, pick a number between, and maybe like 1 and 50, let's say, right? And everybody puts in the chat in Zoom their numbers that they're choosing, and whoever got closest is the winner. So how is
it that someone's not like looking at other numbers? Like is it just like kind of like there's a trust in him and there's no sort of like reconciliation or?
Right. Yeah. It's just
like
trusting.
I'm thinking of like, well, it was The Price is Right. Am I correct with this? With The Price is Right, like the person who would like bid $1 over the other person, and like you're like, oh, like I mean, it's like a shitty move, but then you're like, it's a good strategy. It's a really good. That and like the $1 to like pick up the bottom. I was curious if there was any gaming that would be going on in the giveaways because they sound so good. That's what I was thinking.
I might do colors or days of the week as well, or something like that. Depends on how many people.
Days of the week? How many people?
Yeah, there have to be, you're right. It couldn't even be months because there's at least going to be 20 people there.
Well, that's what I'm going to be talking about, don't you?
No.
I'm going to be talking about like days of the week and months. And I'm going to be like, so it's funny that you bring that up. I'm
always.
So let me take
100% of the time that I talk to you, I'm like, here's this thing. And you're like, well, that just so happens to be exactly what I'm working on right now. That just so happens
to be. So listen to this. You asked me the question. You started this. You're like, are you excited? Are you excited for this? And the short answer to that question is yes. And let me tell you why I'm excited. Like, I'm always excited to go and like, you get to go and interact with people and they're actually listening to you. And so it's kind of fun with that. But that's not why I'm excited. I'm excited for this because I'm covering a bunch of new material.
Yay!
And it's not like I mean, it's not, if you listen to a lot of the stuff I do, it's probably not that new material, but this is the first time I have presented all of these different things that I've been talking about, probably over the past like maybe year and a half, and I'm bringing it together, and I'm excited because I've been thinking about, I've had a desire to want to do this, like this presentation, but I haven't really had the opportunity. Like, I mean, I guess I could have done on my own YouTube channel, but I was like, and then this kind of like, you reached out to me, and it landed in my lap, and that's always a nice thing to happen, because that way you don't have to like go and do the planning, and for someone like me, that's really important.
Yeah.
But most importantly is it provided an impetus, like this thing I've been thinking about, like, oh yeah, I want to do it, but
Now you gotta do it.
6 months have gone by and I haven't done it. So it's like, it's nice, this opportunity is has pushed me across this threshold I wanted to cross. So I'm
Awesome.
grateful for that. And then even more interestingly, at least from in my trajectory, my personal trajectory, is like, I want to do this more. Like, this is the stuff which I want to talk about more now. And I'm planning on using the presentation deck I've created, and to do it many more times. In fact, this is, I see, part of one of 3 different presentations, all underneath the same heading. And so, I'm kind of beating around the bush for people who are following along in this conversation, but it's I'm calling it Rewilding Consciousness.
Wow.
Or it's the Rewilding Consciousness Project.
Rewilding has been this word that keeps coming to me over and over again, and we were talking about how Agenda 2030 or 2021 or both, or the Great Reset, whatever, they use this concept in this negative way, where they want to rewild the world, as in take humans out of the wild and let wilderness be wilderness, which sounds great until you realize what they mean is they want to put all humans into these tiny little city boxes, and you can't leave the city unless you're really, really rich or special or something, and so and that's awful, right? But reclaiming that word, because rewilding, I think, is actually probably why they chose this word, because it's what we need in our own self and our own soul, right?
Right. Well, I mean, I've got a lot of friends who are in like that permaculture world. Like, that's like a whole world. Like, if permaculture is your thing, like, you see the world in a certain way, and you hang around with people and you're like interested in like permaculture stuff. And I wouldn't quite say that's me, but I'm definitely like 1 degree of separation away from that. And rewilding is a term which I probably have heard mentioned in those circles before. And usually it's talked about, like, in a very kind of like material sense, like, the ecosystem, and like, stuff like that. Like, and I'm kind of saying that like with a smile on my face, with a little like smirk, because like, as soon as you start naming it, like, this is what I'm thinking in the back of my mind. I'm like, as soon as you name it, you've like taken it away from what it actually is. But like, baseline reality, like going back to baseline reality. And so the rewilding is usually talking about like, trees and like stuff like that. And then you talked about rewilding, how it has been picked up in the in a globalist type of in that paradigm as well. And that's something like I go back, like, I'm really, there was once upon a time in my life that I spent a lot of like mental energy there, like being familiar with the projects and like the people. And, it's kind of funny when like Klaus Schwab is like, is that even real? Like,
Yeah.
this is like a mocking sort of thing. But anyway, so I haven't been that close to it recently, but I'm aware of it. Like, I know that world. So like, I'm not surprised, but I'm also like, oh, wow, I didn't know that they use rewilding, and they're kind of doing it both metaphorical, but then what you're describing is literal. Like, and you said the people who are going to be in the boxes, that's after that's after the mass reduction of people. Seemingly that's what they've always said it. No surprise. I'm still like, I don't know how true that's going to be, because I haven't seen it so extreme, but definitely I've got my pulse on that. But what I'm talking about with rewilding, conceptually the same, but very, very different in application, and that is that of consciousness. And consciousness has always been, at least at the if not at the forefront, at the foundation of everything which I do. And consciousness, I mean it in a very, very like, that's one of those words which can have many different definitions or connotations. Like, so I'm going to be very clear when I'm saying that. I'm like, what we perceive and like how we interpret it and understanding how that literally creates our life experience. Like, I'm just talking about that with consciousness. The rewilding aspect is for consciousness is being able to step outside, like practical techniques and understanding the reasons why. And there's always been, a desire for people to want to do this, but really at this moment in time where all of like the storylines, the timelines are being so controlled, and for those of us who are like, well, that's not a storyline which I'm participating in order to do that, you have to like hit a reset button. You have to like, yeah, you can't detox while you're still in it. And so the rewilding of consciousness are like very, very practical, like first, like in theory, a concept, but then practical techniques of being able to take like the part of your mind which is integrated in that world and get free from that for the sole purpose of then allowing it, like, whatever you're going to be perceiving and paying attention to, not to have that feedback loop to this false reality system, which is morphing. It's the same false reality we've always been in. That's what we need to get away from. So it's all we know, but what we were originally born into will not look like what is coming. And so it's like, that's where this is all coming from. And you talked about, days and months, like a big part, like it doesn't sound sexy. Like, we wanted to hear all the sexy stuff, but like, if you really look at the foundation of what our realities and our consciousness has been built upon, like, you got to bring it. If you want to really get out of it, you don't go to the top of the skyscraper. Like, you don't bring down the skyscraper. I mean, you could bring down the skyscraper with a controlled demolition, with exotic weaponry, or you go down to the base, the foundational level, and that will topple it over. And so when we go and we look at our reality, like it's the foundational level which we can really begin to work with. And that is the importance of understanding like the shaping of a paradigm of participating in a certain calendar and timekeeping mechanism. And so that's a big part. Like, I'm going to go into that, like, and really break that down, and then also show or share my own techniques, I guess, of, and not necessarily to say it's the right one, but to say like, you could duplicate it if you want, but at least be inspired and be like, oh, okay, this is how I would do it. But I'm going to show my own technique of like how I do that, because when you just hear an idea, that's one thing, but then to actually see like, okay, this is how it's done. And what I do is I've created my own system where I still know what what day of the week it is. I'm still able to interact with the people who I know who still need to use a calendar, but with modifications and different perspectives, like it just changes. It changes the whole thing. And so I'm going to be talking about that.
I love that so much. It's so exciting for me to hear about that too, because I feel like it fits perfectly with the themes and with the time of the year and with this specific one day of brightness. But I also really lately have been kind of understanding more deeply how much programming we have, which is obvious, right? But when you really think of it, I'm like, okay, well, people ask you like, how long have you been awake or whatever? And I'm like, honestly, most of my life. But every single day, second, moment, year, whatever, I'm peeling away even more and even more. And this is now almost 40 years that I've been like deprogramming myself, but I'm always receiving more programming too. We're still like swimming in this stew, like you're talking about, of these structures that were handed to us and these programmings that were handed, these, indoctrination and habits. There's habits we've had our whole life too, like, because this is what everyone's doing and how deep that goes. And I was thinking of like, do you have to actually put as much effort into like the inputs that you're taking in and what you're doing with your time and what you're creating to equal an opposite power, that all that shit that's been fed into you your whole life. Do you know what I mean? Like, is that, or we just need like a critical mass amount of like new programming, new intentions, and new habits to just like break free of this? But either way, what you're going to be doing on One Day of Brightness is going to be a big help towards that, freeing ourselves.
Well, I hope so. I hope so, and at least like other ways of looking at it, because it's a sum, and I think a collection of a lot of different things. I suppose. Realistically, I don't know anyone else who's watching this, but how many of you lived through an apocalypse before?
Yeah.
So it's like we're all kind of figuring it out as we go. So there's that, and there's like there's no like we all got a piece to the puzzle. We all got a piece to the puzzle.
Yeah.
So, but like what you're describing, what I'm describing has always been a possible option for anyone who's lived at any times. If you live in like the 1600s and you recognize like the false reality of your 1600s lifestyle was too much, and like you go and you live in the woods and you become like Walden, and you're like where our history, whatever the hell that is peppered with like stories of people always saying enough is enough, I gotta go. And so like that's always been there. And like what we're talking, and what I think, this is what you brought up the point, like does it happen like you have to go and like counterbalance all of this sort of stuff? Like I think there's a truth to that, but I think there's something else going on also. I think that what you're saying is probably more accurate or more timely to the person who just like at any given time in history is saying, I need to get away from it. And then that makes sense because like this is your journey. But when the entire system is collapsing like this, and there've been other times where people have like lived through collapses, but I think what's interesting about this is in those other times there is the false hope of escape. Like if I could just get out of my borders, then, but when that is taken away, like that's kind of special right now. Like you could say like, well, what about Sweden or what about Denmark? Well, no, but it's a different game. It's a different game. And so it's all collapsing. And the point I'm trying to make with that is like all of that other stuff is like, it's it's going to go away. Like either from like just total, like what's going on, or like, I don't want to be like all like gloom or doom, but like the trauma of seeing something, or the excitement of like completely, like it's going to be, we're like climbing up a roller coaster. And like you're going up and you're like, have you ever been in like I think it's called Magic Mountain in the Disney torture device? And it's not, it's the roller coaster that's in the dark. And so when you're going up, you don't know how high you're going.
Oh God.
Which rackets up the tension. Because
Yeah.
at least if you're in a regular roller coaster, you can see how much higher you're going to go. You at least know it's coming. So we're though in the dark. We don't know, like, they've been stringing us along for like 50, 60, 70 years. So it's, we're experiencing more than what people were saying back in 2001. You listen to Bill Cooper and his recordings in the 90s, like, it was evident in his voice that this was going to happen any day.
True.
And that was 21 years ago. And like you could go back and read James Shelby Doward's work from the 70s. And like he was saying it's going to happen any single day. And like, here we are like 50 years later. So it's like this has like been a slow drip, but it certainly seems to be coming closer and closer and closer. And that's when like the roller coaster begins. And that's when we're going to find out, like, I don't know, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And all of our prep work has been the prep work we got.
Which is exactly what fall is all about. Like, well, you prepped and you did all the shit, and I'm like, let's see what you got after harvest.
It's my personal opinion. I mean, there are a couple ways. I think people are going to come at this in a lot of different ways, but the most important is going to be in consciousness, because you need to begin to see and perceive in a different way. Like, you could have all the MREs in the world, but like, there's 1,000 ways that's not going to be valuable at all. And at the very least, it is probably, it's like a good thing to have, but it's like a Band-Aid. Band-Aids are like nice to have around the house if you're prone to paper cuts.
Yeah. Yeah. But
like,
really...
I don't know any other reason for Band-Aid. So anyway, I want to go back to the news, but I want to give you a moment to like kind of reflect back on what I was just spitting out there.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that this is part of what my own, spiritual work with people has been all about and leading towards, and my spiritual work with myself and my own path. And like we were talking about, peeling off the layers more and more and more all the time. is that you really get down to seeing, and you and I've talked about this many times, where that humans are actually much more than what we have been led to believe and what we have generally experienced so far. And that this, we have this conception that this is like a person sometimes will have this like magic skill or whatever, or like a person sometimes will be able to like turn water into wine, or sometimes there's this very special, unique thing. And I think now it's like time to get the fuck over it and be like, oh no, all of us have that. And literally, like, you listening right now have this. I don't know if I want to be this much of a dick about it, but like, you have a responsibility to pick the fuck up and like get with it and start to like figure out what that is. Why are you here? And what can you do? Because there's so much more than just like the material matter of density that we've been led to like really reduce down to and identify with. And there's all of this. And that's part of what One Day of Brightness is about too, right? Is like, and I didn't mean to bring it back to that as this shameless, promotion, but it really is about helping people get more and more into that realization that every moment has the potential for whatever you call magic. And it's not just this like trite Disney like Hallmark sugar coated thing. It's like this thing you really have inside of you. There really is source inside of you, and soul, or whatever you call that, consciousness, and you're deeply connected to it. It is you, actually. And I think it's like yearning to come out. When this idea that like pressure on carbon, and all of a sudden it's like a diamond someday. Like, I feel like that's this, on the other side, the inverted side, they're like pressure, we're going to control you with technology. And we're like, okay, pressure, but actually I'm going to become a diamond and shine. And you never even expected that. So fuck you.
Well, it's what I think is so nice about right now, like, what's going to happen is going to happen. And I think that my personal opinion is this is how I would, if I had to bet upon like the trajectory, this is what I was going to say has the highest probability is, as the situation unfolds, it becomes a necessity. It becomes a necessity that your experience in life will have to change. Your experience of what you think it means to be human will have to change. And it's going to come out that way. And what happens, I mean, it's the whole sort of like 4-minute mile story. It's like, no one could ever run a 4-minute mile, but then as soon as someone broke that threshold, well, then like it happened quite frequently. And that is part of the nature of all false realities. And so like a false reality is just like what it sounds like. It's a reality which is not true, but you believe it to be true. But I think that it has a connotation, like a negative connotation. Like any human being experiences a false reality. Like as soon as we start using words, like, I mean, that you're using symbols of things that aren't that. Like it's just a nature. There's not like the nature of like being human and and being around other people. So it's they're all false realities. They're just some which are like more out of balance with the actual reality or the baseline reality than others. But nonetheless, where was I going? So it's like in order to get out of the false reality which we're in is going to change, and in order to get out, that's going to have to collapse. And so that means, this is where I was going. I forgot for a moment. It's the 4-minute mile. That 4-minute mile.
I'm gonna actually, before you, can you remember?
Yes.
Okay, because I'm gonna tell YouTube and wherever else I'm streaming right now that we're gonna go just to Rockfin right now, because Middle Path is a Rockfin only show. And so if you want to join us over there, the link is right below you. Come over. It's free. It costs you nothing. And just like every other platform, you do have to register if you haven't yet, but that's every platform you've ever been on. So come join us on Rockfin, where there's way more people anyway, and the chat is way more off the hook. And we love you guys. And they're gonna not let me cut YouTube now. I'll just do it another way. But sorry, now that we've said goodbye to YouTube, you can complete that thought, Michael.
All right. So what I was saying is, so like we're in this